I really love manual watering. It's rather like nurturing a child. You feel you're doing good to your plants and they really respond, so it gives me a really good feeling. But there's a few tips just that I found that just make it that bit more efficient. First off is this type of can, the shape of can. And as you see, this is an oval. And it sounds ridiculous, but when you walk along carrying two oval cans either side, they actually hit your legs much less. Maybe I've just got very big thighs and calves, but I find them much more comfortable to carry than I do with a traditional round can. And that is just a wee bit wider, but it does make a huge difference. And that is why I'm sure they make oval cans. Now this one, my mum had a nursery and she had dozens of these and I managed to get some from her. And it's a really sturdy one and I love it. This one is made by Hawes, which you can still get now, I'm sure. And I love that too. I have hundreds of cans. I pick them up in sales, people give them to me. I even paint them to match in with a house, would you believe? And I think they're almost like garden furniture to me. I really enjoy them. When I'm watering in the greenhouse, I do use a smaller rounder can, or when I'm watering pots, and that is because I'm not watering so much, not so big quantities, and I have a rose on the end, and I usually have it rose end up so that it sprinkles a nice jet over the plants. And I usually start and finish off the trays so you don't get the dribbles on the little seedlings which can knock them out. So that's my first tip. Come and see my second tip. Now, I love my rain gauge. Now, it's important that when you have these, you don't put it up in a rain shadow. Obviously, you want the fair assessment of what water you've had. And the reason I like it is because you never know how much rain you've had. And if you do, it gives you an idea as to how much you might need to water your plants. And this one measures in millilitres. And I know that we had 14 millimetres the other day, the first time we had rain after a long period of drought. And that is 14 millimetres is equivalent to 14 litres per metre squared, which is a nice whop, so I felt really relieved. But it can be very deceptive, so it's well worth measuring it, monitoring it, and it just keeps you up to speed. They don't cost much, well worth investing in. I am particularly mean with water because we don't have any mains water here. All our water supply comes from a stream down the bottom, or a spring down the bottom of the field, and you always think, oh, we're always going to have that. So I'm just very cagey with my water, and I like to use it very wisely. Come and look at my next tip. This is my working garden and one of my favourite spaces in the garden. And here I use a lot of capillary matting. Now I often bang on about this, but it saves me hours and hours. So here in the summer, where I've got all my cuttings that I'm growing on, these wonderful roses, I've got pelargoniums, lavenders, French tarragon, a type of vervain, these lovely persicarias, fat domino. And I've got this, I've just laid it in a very Heath Robinson way on a flat surface of polystyrene, bit of black polythene, and then the capillary matting on top. And the good thing about that is it reduces the frequency of watering because it just soaks it up like a sponge and then gives it out to the plant as they need it. And the other great thing about it is the plant's roots grow much better. So when you grow them on a hard surface that hasn't got water in it, the roots all tend to go to the outside and very much the bottom of the pot. But if you look at this, when I tap it out, it's much more evenly distributed. It's not nearly so centred on the bottom and the sides. And you get a much nicer plant as a result. Now, people who use it professionally often put a polythene needle punch over the top, and that's just like a black layer with lots of little holes in, and it just protects this capillary matting and stops it getting green and rotting so much. Now, I don't bother with that. I do replace it every so often, perhaps not as often as I should, but I find it still helps me an awful lot. Well worth getting. It's in all my greenhouses and all my plants over there. and I think it must save me days or weeks of watering during the summer months. I've got about 80, 90 pots in my garden, and I really don't have that much time to look after them, but these are all baseless. So this yew, which I grew from a little bushy shrub this big and trained into this shape, has probably been in here for about 10 years, I would say. I've never watered or fed it since the first 3 months. And so obviously, having baseless pots saves you masses and masses of time. And anything that you can make baseless, do so, because A, they grow much better. You can't actually grow yew in a pot with the bottom for any length of time. The root system just does not take to it. But you can see here, underneath the base, I've got some sets around the edge, but just straight earth underneath. And you don't need to have masses of earth. You can just have a whole 300mm diameter, and that would be enough for the roots to go down, and they will get all the food and water they need from that. So that really is a great time saver. If you want more information, have a look at my baseless pots video, and it will tell you all you need to know about them. And for my next tip, I have hundreds of water butts. Now this one is a really nice old lead one, again from my mum's garden, and it is actually underneath the downpipe. When it runs out, which it does in dry summers, and this is in a very critical space, then I have a hose pipe which I just sneak behind this pot here, and I just top it up from the tap. And I find I much prefer watering than anything with the can from a butt, because you dunk the can in, pull it out and you water. You know exactly how much each plant's had. It takes no time to fill it up and to put it on. Whereas with your hose, you're standing there waiting, and I sometimes think you just really don't know how much water you put on each plant. And I like to know how much I'm giving them. Now I've got a huge variety of water bottles. This is by far my nicest. I've also got a plastic barrel which I coated with code 4 lead by the greenhouse, which I love. I've got 2 or 3 or 4 that I got from eBay for like 50p. The best ever bargain I got from eBay was for 50p for a lovely water butt, but I got it at the first price, and then they sent back a message saying, sorry, it's been stolen, you can't have it. I bet. Anyway, I missed that one. I've had many great other ones. And I also like the old wooden whiskey barrels, and I have them dotted all the way around the garden in the most prominent places where I need to water. And they're not under downpipes always, but they're near a hose, so I can just top them up when they're empty and then use it from the barrel. And I find that a really nice way to water. One thing I can never understand is why most hoses are bright yellow or bright green. And you go to a beautiful garden and you see snakes of brightly coloured ugly hose trailing around everywhere. I was so relieved when I found these wonderful dark green hose pipes by Claverton Cloches. Lovely brass fittings on the end, and it's just such an unobtrusive colour. And I think it's really, really wonderful. So this is the hose I'm moving over to now. The girl who runs this company is also got under production with a designer some hose reels that actually wind out, because I've used these in the past, and you lug around and you wheel them out and you wind them back in, but they always seem to fall to bits. They're not that well made. The hoses always kink. But she should be having something out next spring, so I'm going to be looking out for that. But for now, she does this bracket fixing, which you put on the wall. And this came in a sort of bright metal colour, and being a total nerd, I've actually painted mine my house colour to make it fit in. Now, as you can see, I haven't wound it back up on the reel because it's arrived and it's tightly wound for the box for packaging, and I need to pull it out and straighten it on the lawn, and then when the kinks relax, I'll then wind it round. But I think that's really nice, and this is above another of my eBay water butts, which I really, really love. The other problem that you have with hoses is when you take them round corners, they bash or twist or kill all the plants that go under their wake. So I put on these little posts in the most important corners where they're rushed by. And again, I painted them in the house colour, but they're just a nice little touch to the garden. And it just saves an awful lot of plant bashing. And now for my next. If you've got a water body such as this pool, it will invariably evaporate and the water level will drop. So something I need to do in the summer, maybe weekly, maybe fortnightly, depending on the weather, is just top it up. Now you can get automatic solenoid valves, which will top them up automatically, but in the UK they cost a minimum of about £7,000. And they don't always work perfectly all of the time in my experience. So I prefer, for me, just to use the hose. But what I do is I have a water point nearby, a length of hose always connected. I just fling it out and put it in. And also it's a wonderful dunking pool if ever I want to water plants near here. So that's just a few tips for watering, hand watering as opposed to automated irrigation systems, which I'm not a fan of. We do put them in lots of gardens, but in my own garden I much prefer the manual approach and growing plants that really don't need a lot of water. I hope you find those tips useful. Obviously, if you're not going to spend much time watering, then it's best to choose the right plant. So these plants are in pots with bases because I couldn't lift them up, and they have been watered maybe 3 times this year, and it's now September. And this is Verbena Bampton, and I think this is an amazing plant. It seeds around, it needs next to no food and water, it looks amazing, it flowers all summer long, and I just love it. I take it from cuttings and they root in about a week in my hydropod, I find. So choose the right plants if you haven't got much time, and this must be a winner.